And just remember, if you don't know how to change your tire, get off the roof.
I don't know that I get it.
This is Metal Roofing University with Adam and Mason.
Welcome to another episode of Metal Roofing University. I'm your host, Adam Clark, and my co-host, as always, Mason Burchett.
How we doing?
And Mason, 2 episodes in a row.
2 in a row. We have a perfect attendance record for 2021.
Yeah, I think last year we ended up getting 6 episodes, so that was one every
we have done a
2
third
months. Right.
of what we did all year last year, so we are on a roll.
Well, we're excited to talk to you guys about the cost of building materials tonight. What we're having, and everybody's experiencing this really across the country with a lot of different building material components, whether it be lumber or plastic products like vinyl siding and even steel, is the cost of materials is increasing or has been increasing. So today what we want to do is we want to break down the current climate of metal roofing to give you an idea of what the cost of the materials would be for your project or your build. And then also we're going to complement that with the cost of labor in the regions that we sell metal in and abroad. You know, we have a national sales team, so we're able to talk about labor rates across the entire country. So we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into that to give you an understanding of what a total project would cost for a roof renovation or even a new build.
That's right. Yeah, I think the cost of building materials is probably the most relevant topic that we could cover right now. And last year, the industry saw, not just the steel industry, but the construction industry as a whole saw explosive growth and a lot of rising prices from lumber to steel to everything in between, right? So, Adam, when you're talking about the cost of materials, it's important for some people to understand how stuff is priced. There's certain terminology that's used, certain words that are used in the industry that may confuse people if they don't understand them. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so roofing is going to have some of its own unique lingo. Some of you may be familiar with it. Just like in lumber, they talk in board foots. Doesn't always equate to the cost of a board, but it's a unit of measure. With roofing, a lot of times the lingo that's used is a roofing square. Like if you go and you look for shingles and even metal roofing, you're typically talking about pricing a product out per roofing square. And a roofing square is simply 100 square feet of coverage. So when we're talking about the price for materials, when we're talking about roofing products, just know when we say a roofing square, all we're talking about is a breakdown of 100 square foot patches or coverage of the roof. So for instance, if we have a 3,000 square foot roof, so that's going to be the square foot coverage of the roof, not necessarily, not the structure itself, we're talking about 30 squares.
Okay.
So that'll be the primary language that we talk about. We'll probably break a few other things down just to make sure it's in layman's terms.
So square and square foot are different.
Right.
Some people use those terms interchangeably and they're not the same.
Right. 1 square equals 100 square feet.
Bada boom. Now you know. You heard it here first, folks.
We should all be on the same page when it comes to that. So let's just jump right into the material cost of a metal roof. And there's a number of different factors that account for the cost of metal roofing as a product and metal roofing as a project. You know, a project cost varies depending on a few factors, and that's what we're going to be focusing on primarily today. Mason, let's just jump into this and we'll break down what causes a roofing project cost to vary.
So size would be the first thing I would think of that would probably determine the cost of a roof. Naturally, I think the bigger the roof, the more it's going to cost.
Sure.
Right?
Right. Yeah. So the it's practical,
It's simple,
right? Yeah. If you
simple.
build a bigger house, it's going to cost you more money than a smaller house. But that is something to consider because size is affected by a number of different things. You know, some people reference the square footage of their home.
I was about to say that. So a lot of times somebody's like, well, my house is about 1,000 square feet. What's the roof going to cost? I'm like, I don't know. How many dormers has it got? What's the slope of the roof, right? So
How many stories tall is it?
How many stories tall is it? Does
Yeah.
it have a porch, right? So those things, the footprint of your home can be substantially less than the surface area of your roof.
Right. or significantly more.
Right.
So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about size. And the factors that affect size of a roof can of course be overhang. If you've got a 36-inch overhang, which is a little excessive, but just as an example, that wraps the whole perimeter of the structure. So you're going to have much more square foot coverage or more squares required to cover a roof versus one that has an 18-inch overhang.
Yep.
Pitch is also going to come into effect. And anybody who doesn't understand what pitch or roof pitch is, we're talking about the rise over run, how steep your roof is. Yes.
Having flashbacks to high school math.
To geometry. So, if you measure over 12 inches from a specific point on an x-axis, how far down does that roof drop on the y-axis? And if you have a 112 slope, so if you drop 1 inch over 12 inches, that's a pretty low slope roof, and the square footage of the roof is going to be pretty comparable to the square footage of the footprint. But if you have
assuming there's no other complexities.
That's right. But if you have a 12-12 pitch or steeper, which we see regularly, you're increasing the surface area of the roof because of the steeper pitch.
Right. You could easily have nearly double the roof surface area of compared to the footprint of the home.
That's right.
Easily.
That's right. So those are some of the main factors to take into consideration when figuring the cost in relation to size. Smaller roof, a lower pitch, a smaller overhang, that will all cut down on the cost of the roofing system itself. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, so because we mentioned it a couple of times there, the complexity of the roof also comes into play. So you've got slope, then you've got complexity. And complexity would be how cut up is the roof, right? Does it have 50 dormers? Does it have a bunch of valleys? Does it have pitch changes? Those kind of things are what we're talking about when we say the complexity of the roof. And those will directly affect both the cost of materials, because the more complex the roof is, the more trim components you have to have. If you've got dormers, you have to have additional ridge cap, you have to have additional valleys, additional gable trims. For the video people, I just about fell out of my chair. Additional eave trim, like all of that stuff is going to drive the cost of the materials up. It's also going to drive the cost of the labor up because it's more labor intensive to install.
Right. So my philosophy is, if you want to get cut up, go to the gym. Don't cut up your roof.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my Twitter status tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So having a cut up roof, like Mason said, it introduces additional components, trim, closures, flashing that a more simple roof, like a ranch style roof or a roof that just has two sides to it, doesn't have. And as Mason also mentioned, you're also going to have a bit more in terms of labor and liability for leaking. If you think of areas where you're going to have valleys coming together, where water traffic is going to be higher in one single point, well, if it's not done just right, if it's not installed just right, you're running into susceptibility for leaking and repairs and additional costs that could be viewed down the road. So our philosophy is, if you don't, or if you do want to save some money, just minimize the complexity. If it's a new build, then see how you can get the look that you want without making a roof line that is just really complicated and introduces a lot of these trouble areas.
Yeah, and we don't say that for people to lose faith in the ability of metal roofing to be a good system in complex roofs. It's the complete opposite. It's a superior system on complex roofs when it's installed correctly. And that's why we're saying that for a good installer, it'll be a little more labor and intensive because they're going to do it right, and so they take some additional steps to be able to waterproof, like you were saying, to flash things correctly and to do it in such a way that's aesthetically pleasing. Anybody can get up there and slice a tube of caulk in half and get out a trowel and paste it all over the valley, which we've seen, but for somebody to do this the right way, to look great and to still perform the right way, it takes a little bit longer. It's a little more labor intensive.
Yeah. And your risk points or your liability points are going to be there regardless of your roofing system. And like Mason said, the oversized flashing that you can get with metal roofing and the custom pieces that we're able to make, they really do make metal roofing the best option for these complex roofs. And if that's the look that you want, no problem. We can get a watertight system. We just have to communicate the fact that there are going to be additional investments there.
Good point.
So the next thing that's going to affect material costs the most is really going to be the product that you choose. And again, at Best Buy Metals, we have all kinds of metal roofing systems. We've got over 50 systems that you can choose from. They're all steel, some aluminum, some copper, but they're all metal systems, and they're all going to cost something a little bit different. We really like to focus on the residential through fastened panels. It's where we find our greatest success. It's where we believe the greatest need is out in the residential market, and that's the market, and those are the customers that we really like to partner with to give them confidence that this system is going to meet not only their need for a watertight system, but add great value because the cost is not going to be as high as, say, a standing seam or a decorative shingle.
That's right. Yeah, we got all the faith in the world in these through fastened systems to perform up to residential standards when installed correctly, and that's why we push it. That's why we stand behind it. And but like you said, there's a cost factor when you're talking about through fastened compared to concealed fastened, and then we start getting into stuff like decorative shakes, decorative shingles, and slate and tile and those kind of things, all installed different ways, all made out of different kinds of materials and manufactured in different ways that affect the overall cost of the system, from material cost to install cost.
And we covered all of that in episode 2, so it feels like a long time ago, but it was just last year, where we went into deep detail in regards to various roofing systems, their pros and their cons, and why one person would go with a system that's more economical versus why somebody would go with a system that's a little more decorative to meet a specific need. So they're all fine, but what we're saying is tough rib, or what we call our tough rib panel, is going to be the most economic system. It's a through fasten system, but it doesn't take away from the value and from the longevity of the metal roofing system that you're signing up for. So in practical terms, we wanted to break things down and give the listener an opportunity to really hear what the cost of a tough rib roofing system would look like. And Mason, I put some numbers together if you want to just kind of go through these. And this is a real world application, and we're going to put some real numbers out there.
Yeah, so we've got an example here. Again, we're talking about the through fastened tough rib panel. We've got a 2,500 square foot home, single story, basic home. For the video guys, I'm throwing it up right now on the screen. You can take a look at it. This is something super standard, 412 pitch. So you're looking at about 3,000 square feet of roofing here, okay?
Yeah, and that's taking an 18-inch overhang into consideration as well, to make sure we're accounting for all of the square footage represented on the roof.
Right. So when we take the subtotal of total materials used, and when we say total materials, we're talking about the panels, we're talking about necessary trim components, hardware like your screws, and proper sealants. When you take all those into account, you're looking at about $1 a square foot, or about $100 a square, to roof this surface area, this roof that we're looking at right here, in our tough rib metal roofing panels.
And we've actually been doing a current study because we know the cost of materials has been fluctuating and moving. So we've been investigating the cost of a 30-year architectural shingle. And what we discovered, the summary that we put together today, is that the cost of these shingles, not counting the ridge cap and some of the other flashings that you need with 30-year architectural shingle, is between $85 and $90 per square. So when you're comparing that to $100 per square for a metal roofing system, knowing that a couple additional components will be needed for the asphalt shingle roof, you're really talking a dollar for dollar comparison, even with the price changes, even with some of the fluctuation that we've seen in costs. So you're still able to get a 40-year roofing system that's going to last you 40 plus years and look good for 40 plus years, almost dollar for dollar for what you'll get for a 30-year architectural shingle. Now, we're not talking 3-tab shingles. We're talking about a really quality shingle that a lot of people are looking for the aesthetic look. But there are independent studies that show that you're getting 12 to 17 years out of these really good 30-year architectural shingles. And with a metal roof, not only do we have a 40-year warranty on the paint system, but we know that the U.S. steel, the steel substrate, is going to last a lifetime. And that's where we really see the value coming in. We like the dollar-for-dollar comparison. We think that the initial investment, it's important to know that information, but knowing the value you get and the longevity of a metal roofing system is really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, it's steel. They didn't build the Golden Gate Bridge out of asphalt for a reason.
That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's true.
Boom. Steel. It's strong.
So that was a basic roof system. Again, a two-sided ranch-style roof, so it was basic. And we were able to save some money by reducing the complexity of the roof system. Now, if we did go with a more complex roof system, you could see costs, and you would see cost of the materials for the tough rib roofing system go up. How much it changes depends on the pitch and the cuts and the elevation of the roof. You know, how many stories it is off of the ground, because that will affect the installation rate. But for materials, you could see the cost of materials go up 20, 30%, maybe even more than that, depending on the complexity. So that's one of the reasons why we push and promote simple is better when it meets your needs and when you can do it. So, Mason, we've talked about the materials. We know that tough rib, we're looking at about $100 per roofing square or $1 per square foot for that system on a basic or a non-complex roof system. Let's talk a little bit about labor, because that's the other component that comes into play when you're talking about the total investment of a roof build or renovation.
Yeah, so install costs vary obviously by location. And again, due to roof complexities, a good general rule that we go by, though, is you can usually expect the cost of materials to reflect what the cost of labor is going to be as a ballpark price. So typically, if you're looking at $3,000 in material, you can probably expect around $3,000 of labor for an all-inclusive cost of around $6,000 for the roof to be manufactured and installed.
Right, so labor costs, I hope that makes sense, but if you have a bigger roof and it costs more for materials, it's going to cost more for labor. It's going to take longer to do the job. If you have a more complex roof and you have to add additional components, then there's going to be additional labor steps. Cutting panels along hips and valleys is a major one. You know, flashing it around a chimney or a skylight, making sure you have a watertight system around those trouble areas. There's going to be a labor cost associated with that. So, that's a good ballpark or a good rule of thumb. Material cost and labor cost should be equal and proportionate for most applications.
And we say that, number one, so you can know what to expect when you're trying to figure out how much your roof's going to cost. You can also use it as a safeguard, because if you have an installer that's coming in at their labor's half of your material cost, that may be a red flag that they don't really know what they're doing. I'm not saying always. Every situation varies, but somebody that's willing to put on a roof that's labor intensive and cost $6,000 in materials, and they're going to throw it on your roof for $1,500, that could be.
Check the references.
Yeah, check the references. Get some pictures of the work. Go and visit some addresses of the roofs they've installed. That's a red flag.
Yeah, well, what we've seen time and time again is a contractor who charges too little to install the roof will get paid and leave and never be heard of again. So it is always good to check your references. We do a contractor certification course at our facilities, so we're able to spend time with contractors, help them understand our recommended installation practices so that they're using good practices not only when it comes to installing, but we also offer a metal roofing business consultation course as well, where we're helping our contractors to understand what the true cost of installing materials are, so they're not putting themselves in a situation where they can't go and finish your roof. We think that the whole thing comes together to form, all the training comes together to form a really cohesive understanding of what's necessary to not only install the roof correctly, but to do it in a sustainable way for our contractors.
Good point. So now, not every roof is on a new build, Adam, right? So I would say the majority of the time we're looking at re-roof applications. So what are some of the scenarios that could affect the cost of a roof in a re-roof application?
Yeah, so labor costs could go up if you have a roof that has poor structural integrity. You know, we see this happen often when there are multiple layers of shingles, or if there's been leaking and the leaks have not been addressed, where you have waviness or weak spots in the decking underneath the roofing. You know, if you pull all the shingles off and you see that there is sagging between the deck boards or between truss supports, then you're going to have to go ahead and really tear that off and start anew, and hopefully you don't have to get down into the timber within the actual structure and replace that. We do see that, so that is something that can add to the cost of labor. Another thing that can come into play is your roof in good shape? Are your shingles flat? And we'll get some kickback on this, and I understand that and I appreciate that, but we actually don't have a problem as long as a roof is flat, planar or flat, where metal can be installed down over existing shingles. We don't fight that. We support that. We think that that is proper installation as long as a synthetic underlayment or some type of barrier has been put between the panels and the shingles underneath to prevent the dissimilar expansion and contraction with thermal temperature changes between the two materials.
So you don't scratch your warranty.
Yeah, we don't want sandpaper on the bottom of the panels to scratch the warranty.
Inside joke there.
Right. So we want to make sure that that is something that's communicated, but we do believe that, and we've seen time and time again, that this is a practice that not only saves money on the labor side of things, but it reduces landfill, asphalt shingles that are sent to the landfill. And the shingles stop aging when they're no longer exposed to the sun, to the UV rays. So that is something that we stand behind, and that is something that, as long as the roof is flat, as long as the shingles are not warped or distorted and there's no waviness to the roof, cut the shingles back from the edge 6 inches, make sure you have a good thick underlayment down. Installation over existing shingles and over an existing roof is fine. Installation over existing metal panels is not as good of an idea. There are some applications where that makes sense, but for residential application, if for some reason you are having to pull off an old metal roof, it should be completely taken off.
That's good. That's good. So another thing that could affect it too would be the market, the supply and demand. When supply is running short and demand is running high, that drives labor costs. So, for example, here in East Tennessee, we're storm prone. We get a nice tornado outbreak every now and then. Back in 2017, there was a big hailstorm, right?
That's right.
And so, in a relatively small geographical area, you had copious amounts of roofs that needed replaced, and a shortage of installers to do so. So that drives the labor cost up.
Yeah, I was in Cleveland when that happened. I mean, I'm sure people in Texas and Oklahoma have experienced this before, but I mean, we had hail almost 3 inches in diameter, and it came down for like 7 minutes. I mean, it just kept on coming.
It's the best.
Yeah, it was the best. For a roofing company, it didn't feel bad to get that. But what we ended up seeing happen was we had thousands of roofs in a relatively small geographical area where there was a huge demand for labor to replace roofs that were leaking now. Metal roofing, on the other hand, I have a neighbor who has a metal roof, and his roof dented. I mean, There's no doubt about it. The hail was so big and it lasted for so long that the roof still needed to be replaced from an aesthetic standpoint.
Yep.
But the benefit that he had was that he could wait. His roof wasn't leaking. His shingles weren't falling off, and there wasn't water coming into his home. So that's what he did. I mean, I talked to him. He wrote it out. He waited 6 months with a roof that was dented up.
Yeah.
And when the labor demand had dried up, and it dried up hard. I mean, everyone was busy, and then no one was busy because so many roofs had been replaced.
Sure.
He got a great deal on metal from Best Buy Metals, and then a good deal from an installer because they were ready and anxious for some work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Not a lot of people think of it that way. Just another advantage of having a metal roof, because there's a lot of people that didn't have metal roofs, I would imagine, that probably were forced to wait too, just because of supply being high or demand being high, supply being low. But they're out literally in the cold because their roof's leaking.
Yeah, tarps everywhere, and tarps are okay for a temporary fix. But when you're 3-4 months out before you get your new roof put on, you're going to have water damage. You're going to have issues that are just impossible to fix unless you're willing to pay a premium, just like expedited shipping. If you're willing to pay for it, somebody's going to do it. But one of the things I put down here is, our contractors love to spend time with their friends and family, and when there's a demand for them to not do their leisure activities, it's going to cost somebody something.
Of course.
If they're going to do it, it's going to have to be at a higher price.
If they're going to be working every weekend,
that's right.
Right, then they're going to want a fair trade for it, and that's a good point. What else? What's something else, Adam?
Yeah, the third factor, and most of our facilities are in the Southeast, so we're really familiar with labor cost in the Southeast, but cost of living does affect the average rates for installing materials in your labor costs. You've got wages, you've got insurance, you have a number of different things that are regional that can affect the cost of labor. So that's something that connect with us. We have a national sales team. We're pretty in tune with what different regions in the United States, whether it be up in the Northeast where I'm originally from, or whether we're over in California or some areas, Seattle, where you have higher cost of living, we can give you an understanding of what some of the labor rates would be there. But do expect that the cost of living adjustments per region do affect the labor rates as well.
We've got our finger on the pulse. That's been my saying.
That's right.
Lately. We've got our finger on the pulse. I like that for some reason.
And we talked and interact with so many people across so many different regions that it's not hard for us to say, yes, that's fair, or no, that doesn't really seem fair, or what's the demand look like if you had a major storm? That might be why the rate is a little bit higher.
And we're happy to do that. Like, even if you're not transacting with Best Buy Metals, we're happy to steer you in the right direction.
Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about how you can get the best bang for your buck as a consumer when it comes to replacing your roof or a new build with a roof.
Call Best Buy Metals. That's 1-800-728-4010. No, but for real, Best Buy Metals is we pride ourselves in being a champion for the consumer. And we believe that we have a responsibility to give customer support beyond the transaction process. And so we are happy to help give counsel and share expertise, because this is literally what we do all day, every day. Like, we're literally sitting here doing this after hours on a work day because we're passionate about what we do. We are experts in the field. We're confident in the knowledge we have to share, and we are happy to share it with the general public. Even if you're not even if you're not doing business with us, we still want to share our expertise and help you out.
Yeah, and I've said this before. I may have even said it on this show, but we are a customer service company that sells metal roofing. That's always been our drive. That's always been our focus. I remember when we opened up in Mooresville, just north of Charlotte, I got a phone call from a customer who had bought a metal roof from somebody else, and she couldn't figure out how the gable trim was installed.
Right.
And I took the next 10 minutes and I explained the application. I directed her to our installation guide on our website, and we were able to help her solve her problem. This great customer service. Now, was it impressive for her to get that type of service from a customer or from a company that she didn't buy materials from? Yes. Will she come to us if she needs something else? Probably. Will she talk to her friends about the experience she had with us? Probably.
Yeah.
So there is some value from there. We expect a return, but that's not a reason to not offer good customer service. We think it's important that customer service is the driving force, and the good fruit that comes from that is what has kind of allowed Best Buy Metals to be successful. A couple other things that you can focus on when it comes to controlling the cost of your project is considering, can you minimize the size of the roof? Or the complexity of the roof, or the complexity of the roof. If it's a new build and you've never thought about it before, no, there might be some cost savings. You might be able to get a granite countertop instead of a really complex roof. Or maybe just save some money and put it in your pocket. But that's something that you can think about. If you minimize the complexity, so let's say maybe you want your street-facing roof to be a little more complex. Well, maybe the backside of the roof can be a little more simplified. That's definitely a way where you can save some money in not only the labor but in the material arena as well. Yeah,
and we do see that a lot, and we would highly recommend starting that conversation with us early on in your planning phase, because once you get framing up, it's a lot harder to back up and punt. So getting in touch with us or your manufacturer early on in the planning phase of the build is really important, because we can counsel you on ways that you can both save money and make sure you have an ideal setup for a roofing system.
Yeah, and so that's maybe a conversation for people who are building, or maybe if you're buying a new home and you're looking at different new home options, minimizing complexity. But another thing that you can do is you can, if you have an existing home, be sure not to neglect your current roof. We talked about weak spots, sagging plywood, structural integrity challenges. If a roof isn't properly maintained and if you're not in tune with your home, that could be an expense down the road. But if you're future planning, go up into your attic space regularly. Just check and make sure everything is dry. Make sure that there's no moisture. Make sure that there's no black mold or anything that's forming. That'll be really important to make sure that when you do need a new roof, you're not having to pay for all of the extra work to go under the roof, and you may even be able to leave your existing roof on and put a new roof on right over it.
Yeah, believe it or not, the insulation in your attic space, the purpose of that is to not absorb the moisture that is leaking out of the top of the roof.
It's not a sponge.
It's not a sponge to mop up all of the moisture up there. Another thing you could do is plan ahead and position yourself to where you can take advantage of low labor rates when demand is low. And you can find yourself getting a really good deal when contractors and installers are trying to drum up business and they're not spending every weekend fixing hail insurance claims, right? You can really take advantage of a soft market and get a really good deal on, always get a good deal at Best Buy Metals for materials, but get a really good deal on the labor when demand is low.
Yeah, it's a great point. And finally, consider self-installation. Now, this isn't for everybody, and we want to caution you. If you're not comfortable with this idea, then don't do it, and find somebody, maybe a contractor in a soft market where demand is low and you can get a great labor rate. But if you are comfortable considering a roof installation, come talk to us. A lot of our customers are DIY installers. They want to save some money by doing the work themselves. And the good news is the through fastener tough rib system is actually a really affordable system when it comes to materials, but it's also a very easy system to install. So consider that. And if you want to do some coaching or some consulting with Best Buy Metals, let us know. But think about it. You could save 50% of your project cost if you're comfortable doing it yourself, and we can help get you to that point.
Yeah, so those are all really good points, and hope that brought you some value. That is the purpose of this podcast, is to bring you guys value. We do appreciate the feedback and the support we've gotten from some of you guys out there in Radio Land. And please do continue listening to the podcast. Check out the website. We've got some cool content posting up, some videos up there. If you're listening to the audio version of this, we do video record every episode. So if you want to see our lovely faces and like the roof diagram and some other graphics that I throw up that we're talking about, that are relevant to the conversation, go to YouTube and check out Metal Roofing University.
Yeah, and leave us some feedback. We want to make sure we're answering relevant questions. So we've got some Metal Mythbusters coming up, and we're going to talk about some common myths that are associated with metal roofing. So that'll be really fun to dive into some of those. But we only want to talk about content that's important and interesting to you, so let us know.